Hey friends, welcome to TechHarvesting. Today's video we are gonna have a look at this little guy right here. This is a Raspberry Pi. This is a small computer which has all the necessary parts to run all the applications that you need. So just like a normal computer, this has a CPU, RAM, the USB ports right here. It has 4 of them. You can hear music to this headphone jack. You have 2 display cables, so 2 HDMI ports, and even a power supply. This is damn fast. This is damn cheap also when compared to other computers. And today, let's experiment with this little guy. So let's go through what are we going to do in this video. First, let's have a look at the components of this little computer right here. Then let's talk about some use cases, like what we'll use it for and when we'll use it for. And after that, I'll just show you how you can set this computer up. And I'm going to show you how to do it without a monitor or a keyboard, so you can access it directly from your computer, which is much easier to do when compared to getting a new keyboard. We should get a new mouse, we should get a display, and it's gonna become much difficult for us to do. So let's start with the hardware components. Let's have a look by taking a specification look of this little computer. So this has a Broadcom BCM2711 quad-core processor, and it has a 64 bits SoC. It's a system on chip at 1.5 gigahertz, so it is very fast also. And it has an option of 2 GB, 4 GB, or 8 GB of RAM. And currently, the Raspberry Pi that I have is 4 GB of RAM. You could choose between these, and the price will also vary between the amount of RAM you choose. It comes with 4 USB ports, 2 USB 2.0 ports, and 2 USB 3.0 ports. And it has 2 of these HDMI ports so that we can connect to displays. But in this video, I'm not going to show you how to use the HDMI ports because we are SSHing into the Pi, so we don't need to do that. And it has this power supply. It has a micro SD card slot. If I could take this guy out, below here there's a micro SD card slot to load the operating system and store everything. And you could also use a USB as the storage data in here. And this I have this 32 GB micro SD card which should be put in here. And yeah, so that's the specifications of this guy. And we can also have this Ethernet jack in here, so it's a gigabit Ethernet jack. Yeah, so let's go on and see what we can use this little computer for. So we can use this guy in a lot of places. It's mostly used as an IoT device, so maybe as a monitor for water, like a water meter, or maybe in some wind stations, like where the winds are going. It can be used to measure the winds. And we mostly use this for artificial intelligence, so we can use Python and program with some artificial intelligence in this guy. So you can run all these AI programs, and you can run ML tasks, and you can do other stuff like that with this. You could also have a web server running on this guy, so you could connect to its go to its IP address and maybe on a specified port, and you'll be able to get some website or some kind of a web server that listens to that port. So that's also another thing you could do with this guy. And he actually runs the operating system called Raspberry Pi OS, which is like a part of Debian. So it's part of the Debian family. It takes everything in Debian and it's made from the base of Debian, so you can do whatever you can in Debian with this operating system also. And you can basically install any operating system on this, like any Linux operating system. Mostly you won't use Windows with this, but still this is something. You can also conduct multiple projects with this. Maybe you could have a screen attached in here, like a digital display, and you could show some numbers in there, maybe some YouTube subscribers or something like that. That can also be done. A lot of stuff can be achieved with this small computer. And now let's have a look at how you can set this computer. So now let's go ahead and install the Raspberry Pi Imager tool, which helps us install the operating system on a Raspberry Pi, and also the SD card formatter tool so that we can format our SD card to make it empty. It's actually a very simple process to install. You can go through the installer. Once that's done, you can open them up. So here's my Raspberry Pi Imager, and let's open up the SD card formatter. Yes. So yeah, so first thing you must do is you have to select your SD card. So make sure you have plugged it in. I have this USB hub in here where I've plugged in my SD card. So you can just plug it in if you have an SD card reader. And you can select your SD card, and then you can do quick format, leave everything like that, and you can hit the format button. All the data on this drive is going to be erased, so be careful that you don't have anything you need in there. So if there's only things that you don't need, just hit yes, all the things will be gone. And yeah, formatting was successful. Okay, all those done. You can hit OK and close that over. Next, you're gonna use the Raspberry Pi imager to install an operating system on the Raspberry Pi. So currently, when you get the Raspberry Pi, it's not gonna have any operating system. You'll have to install it manually. So the OS, you can choose it from here. There are a lot of them in here. You can use things like Ubuntu. So there are Ubuntu Server, Ubuntu Core, all the different versions of Ubuntu. There's Manjaro, which is an Arch-based Linux distribution. But for now, I'm going to use the Raspberry Pi Lite, which means there's no desktop environment. They're going to SSH into it. We don't need a display monitor. We don't need a keyboard. We don't need a thing like a mouse. So you can just select Raspberry Pi OS Lite. Next, you have to choose the storage. You can click in there and choose your drive and make sure it's like all reformatted. And then you can hit the right button. Yes, we have already cleared everything from there. So this might take a few seconds or a few minutes, depending on the speed. So I'll come back to you once this is done. So I got a message from the imager that it was successfully written to my SD card. So now let's open up File Explorer and go on to the drive with the name boot, which is where the SD card is. And there's a small thing that we should change in order to access our Raspberry Pi remotely with the help of our computer without needing a mouse, keyboard or anything. So directly SSHing into this. For that, you'll need to go ahead and create a new file and name it SSH all in caps and remove all the extensions from there. So just SSH, hit enter. It might show this warning, just hit yes and it's done. So it's just a file which has no extension. So when we boot up the Raspberry Pi, you'll get to know that SSH is enabled. Next, you can close that up, and now we are going to go ahead and set it up within our network. Now let's insert the SD card onto our Raspberry Pi and make sure you click properly so that it's not loosely connected, so make it tight. Next, I'm just going to keep this on top of this just to make it safe. The next thing we must do is to take in a power adapter and connect it onto the Raspberry Pi. So it has this power adapter right here, and you're just going to connect it to there. Now you might see a few lights. You can just leave the Pi for there for about 2 or 3 minutes for its first initial boot, because it's gonna resize the disk and do some things with the SD card. So we could do that. We have to just wait for a few seconds, and I'll come back after that. Next, let's connect the Ethernet cable onto our Raspberry Pi. You can just click it in, and you might see some light coming if your Ethernet cable has that light, which will show that it's connected properly. Now let's go ahead and set up SSH onto our Raspberry Pi so that we can connect to it remotely from our own computer. Next, you can open up your terminal. So right here I'm using Windows Terminal, and you can write in the command SSH pi act and the IP address of the Pi, or you can give Raspberry Pi, which is the host name of your Raspberry Pi. For now, I already connected to it once, so just to check the connection. So I got its IP address, that's 192.168.29.205. Hit enter. It's going to ask you your password. At first, it might show you some warnings like, do you want to connect and all those things. Just type in yes and hit enter. You have to give the password. So you're going to give the password, and the default password is going to be Raspberry. So enter that in and hit enter. And you can see it's like connected to our Raspberry Pi. So this is our Raspberry Pi that we are accessing right now. We didn't use a monitor, we didn't use a keyboard, no mouse, nothing. It's your Raspberry Pi. You can run all the Linux commands like host name -pi. You get your IP address. You could run _release -a. So you can see this is Raspbian, and release 10 is a Debian Buster. It's based on Debian Buster. So that's how you can set up your Raspberry Pi. I hope you did it properly. It's actually a very simple process. It might be a bit confusing, but that was actually it for this video. Thanks for watching, and make sure to subscribe, like, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.